it's a good day to be an Alien fan. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of Alien Romulus. Easily one of my most highly anticipated films of the year. So if you are just joining my channel, just finding me for the first time, or have not seen some of my older content, I have reviewed every single film in this franchise. I did it with a buddy of mine, Durbania, who's not so active on YouTube anymore, but all those videos are still there. And to sum it up, I have always been a massive fan of this franchise. Even some of the lesser films I find to be very watchable. Really, the only two that I find to be completely unwatchable is Alien 3 for its travesty in the opening act and just the dark tone that I don't really care for, and Alien vs. Predator Requiem because it's literally unwatchable. Get these motherfuckers a light. But even though I find things to enjoy in pretty much every Alien sequel, there is no touching the top two. And I don't even think that's really a controversial statement. Alien is one of the most influential films of all time. Aliens is one of the greatest sequels of all time. And there's just never been an Alien movie that has come close to matching what either of those two have brought to us as fans. And I got so excited when I found out that Fede Alvarez was going to be leading up a new Alien sequel. Any other name, I probably would have been like, what are they gonna try to do now? What weird, wacky direction are we gonna go this time? As soon as you stamp his name on there, I'm like, oh fuck yes. But have no fear, this is gonna be a completely spoiler-free review. I'm not gonna talk about any major plot points with any kind of specificity, especially in the third act. I will be talking about things that were in the marketing. I will be talking about the basic premise of the film that you get in the first 5-6 minutes of the movie, so nothing that you need to be worried about finding out. It's not going to affect your experience at all. And of course, when I'm discussing my pros and cons in regards to things that are spoilerific, I will be as vague as possible, I promise you. And after this review, later on this weekend and into next week, I will be following up this review with a number of rankings. Of course, I'm going to re-rank the Alien films. I'm fairly certain I'll rank all of Fede Alvarez's films, and then I'm going to do an Alien vs. Predator tier list ranking where I rank all the films of both of those franchises. So stick with me for all of that. So the basic premise of this movie is that you have a young group of space workers. They want to take a 9-year journey in their ship, but they have to secure a cryo bay in order to survive that journey. And so they decide to steal it from this seemingly abandoned space station called Romulus and Remus. But even though it's abandoned, they're not alone. This film does take place canonically between Ridley Scott's original film and James Cameron's Aliens. As far as movies that you need to watch to be fully informed on some of the references and some of the visual callbacks, things of that nature, I would say anything that Ridley Scott has directed. Fede Alvarez absolutely goes to the school of Ridley Scott, and so anything that Ridley has brought to this franchise, it would benefit you to be fresh on watching those films so that you can pick up on everything that Fede pulls from them. And with all that being said, let's kick it off with the positives, and I'm just gonna cut right to the chase. I absolutely loved this movie. For me, it is everything that I have wanted from an Alien film for pretty much as long as I've been watching movies, because I was born after the first two had come out. And again, while I have enjoyed some of the Alien sequels more than most, and there's certainly some things, even with the Ridley Scott Prometheus Alien Covenant stuff, that I enjoy while not fully being concepts that I liked. This, the style, the approach, the pacing, the horror tone, everything that Fede Alvarez brings to this is what I want. For me, it was the perfect mix of having a filmmaker that is clearly a massive fan of this franchise, and so he is very much playing in the sandbox as a fan, while finding plenty of opportunities to bring in his own style, his own horror sensibilities, his own visceral nature with some of the kills, and even kind of expanding the lore, taking the lore in places we have not seen before, and even revisiting a number of things from other Alien films that maybe didn't go so well for a lot of us the first time, and he wants to give it another shot. The way that he recreates the look and the style and the vibe of the Ridley Scott film primarily, I thought was just spot on, from all of the analog computers and the sound design. They actually went back and got original sound tapes from that film to make sure that they match pretty much exactly in this movie. The way that he used predominantly practical effects, especially with the gore and the creature designs, God bless you, sir, because I will never stop championing practical effects over digital. I understand we're in a time where digital is the shit and that's what everybody wants to use because it's easier and sometimes cheaper and more, no pun intended, practical, but it just does not replace how real, how grounded, and how believable genuine, well-crafted practical effects can be. And this is the best that the xenomorph has looked, the best that the kills have looked, and the best that these sets and production design has looked since the first two films. And to go even further with that, the fact that he took this all the way back to its horror roots, ever since Aliens, Alien franchise movies have always been a lot more balanced into the action, more so than the horror, borderline slasher tone that we had from the first film, that haunted house vibe. The fact that he brought it all the way back to that and gave it his own intense little injection in there with how crazy his movies are and how wild and how visceral they are. I mean, this movie is a straight up horror flick. Yes, there's some action. We do have some Aliens tone in here, especially as it moves on. Yes, there's a lot of sci-fi, but this is a horror flick. And he finds multiple ways to have all these individual little sequences that are all nail-biting, that are all tense as hell, that gives every variation of the xenomorph its time to shine. The face huggers are scarier than they have ever been in this movie. You even have the chest burster scene, which has really not had a whole lot of shock value since the first time we all saw it in the first film, and he finds a way to bring something new to that. Even the emergence of the full adult form of the xenomorph, and as they multiply, like, if you were a fan of those first two films, he just nails the balance between the approach and the tone and the pacing of both of those movies in Alien Romulus. And for the most part, every single time that Fede pauses to give you some kind of an indirect or a direct callback to any film in this franchise, I think he did it very well. From the way that, of course, I said the sound design, from the color scheme and the look of these ships, even very specific shots like one that we saw in the trailer where one of the characters emerges from an airlock and is holding a gun while there's steam and wind coming behind her that is just straight up Aliens, Ripley's about to whoop the shit out of the Alien Queen vibes. There were a few that were too on the nose that we'll get into, but the vast majority of them, it felt like appropriate fan service, not desperate fan service, not unneeded fan service. It just works to get you back into the vibe of those movies and get you back into the joy that you had as a fan while you were watching those original two films. Also really like the cast of characters here. Some of them are more prominent than others, but the main character here of Rain, I thought was a very capable lead, as the actress that we saw earlier this year in Civil War, and she was great in both of them. Her character wasn't nearly as enjoyable in Civil War, but I like what she brings here. I like the character arc that they give her. And she also has this synthetic companion with her that's kind of like her pseudo brother, who is named Andy. And for as many times as we have had a synthetic android character in these Alien films, pretty much all of them, I think he is one of the best ones. We've had the evil androids in Ash and in David. We have had the heroic androids like everybody's favorite Bishop. We've had things in between. But what I liked about this character and what they explored with this synthetic is they really do play around with directives versus morality. What it takes for a machine to behave like a human and to feel like a human. When does their, if you want to call it emotional drive, when does that circumvent how they have been programmed? And so I thought it was a really interesting way to revisit a classic element of this franchise while doing something new with it. I can't elaborate on this very much without going into spoiler territory, but I will say, as somebody who is not crazy about Prometheus and Alien Covenant, there are little things in here that Fede Alvarez brings to try to bridge a little bit better those movies with the original Alien films, and I really liked what he did. It actually made me appreciate those other films a little bit more. So I know a lot of you guys are in that same camp. I think you're going to enjoy what he does. And finally, when this movie does start to branch off from the fan service and from the recreation of things from the first two films and very much being a fan's movie, when it does branch off from that and go in its own direction and bring its own ideas and advance the lore in some new and unique ways, I loved everything that they did. Not everybody is going to. I'm going to warn you about that right now. The third act, the last 20 so minutes of this film, is going to make it or break it for a number of you for understandable reasons. But luckily, this is one of those times where when a director takes a big swing and takes a risk and goes off on a limb with a unique idea, I'm one of those people that likes what they do. And I appreciate the fact that while having all of these much safer approaches to the film and delivering what we all ask for and what we all have wanted, most of us have wanted for a long time, they still find the time to push it in their own direction and leave their own mark. Moving on to the mixed, really the only thing here to discuss, and I certainly am not mixed on it myself, this is what I wanted, but this is going to be something you're going to see divide everybody, is that this very much is a movie made for fans. This is a film that is derivative of the first two films in a lot of ways and tries to modernize it, bring it all back together, and deliver us an experience that we have not had since Aliens. And for the majority of us out there, that's what we want. That's what we have wanted. That's what we wanted when Prometheus came out. That's what we asked for when they tried to give us a weird compromise in Alien Covenant. And so for most of us out there, he's given us exactly what we're asking for. But you're still going to get some people that walk into this and think that it's a little too reminiscent, that it's a little too much fan service, that it's a little bit too much based into nostalgia for those first two films when they would much prefer something be completely unique or mostly unique. And that's not really what this movie is. So you will know for yourself which end of that camp you're going to lie on. If you really want to harken back to Alien and Aliens and you've been waiting for a movie to do it, this is going to be your sequel. If you like things like Prometheus that go in these wild new directions and you're upset that we're going back to the originals, then you're not going to love this movie. So decide for yourself which end you're on. I'm very much on this side. And the other thing that I'll bring up here in the mix section, I think is really going to depend on your theater, because I asked one friend and they did not have this experience, and then I asked another friend and they had the exact same experience as me. In the first act of this film, there's a couple of spots where it was difficult to hear the dialogue. There's a lot of ambient noise with the ships and the steam and everything going on, and there's another segment where they're in a crowd of people. Both of those segments in the first act, I was like, oh God, no, is the whole movie going to be this way? It wasn't. It resolved itself very quickly, luckily, but where I was worried maybe it was just my theater, it seems like it's multiple theaters, or it's just the mix of the film. So some slight audio issues in the first act of the film. And now moving on to the negatives, and these are all very small for me, very small. One of them is that you have a trope, a character cliche within this group of characters where he is just the guy that is an asshole. He says everything wrong at all the wrong times. He does the most asshole thing you can do in any situation. And I like that when it's played for comedic effect. When it's just a character who's a piece of shit, I have a hard time believing that any of these other people that are much more reasonable would even tolerate that person. Now, the payoff you usually get with that character is that when they get fucked up in the movie, it's a bit rewarding for you, and so it is saved by that. But this character needed at least one scene where they don't seem like the biggest prick on the goddamn galaxy. Second issue is that because this very much follows the formula of those first two films, there is a bit of predictability to it. There's a certain hint that you have of where things are going to go, how the acts are going to be structured, when things are going to start to unfold and take turns. And so while I very much enjoyed where things went, there wasn't massive surprises necessarily. And the third and final issue, which is really the only thing in this movie that I strongly disliked, but it was, this much of the runtime, is that there's a couple of things that they do here that I think leaned too far into fan service because they just weren't necessary. They were things that could have been avoided, that weren't integral to the plot. 90% of the fan service I appreciated and I thought was done very well, and it was done subtle enough where you almost had to be a film nerd to pick up on a bunch of it. But one thing that was done to tie it even stronger to the original film, and one callback line that a character gives, I didn't feel it was necessary. The callback line in particular, I was like, oh, why do you guys do that? It never works. It never is an awesome moment. It's always like, ugh. No. But overall, guys, I'm over the moon about this one. This is easily one of my favorite films of the year. I can't wait to go see it a second time. It delivered everything that I personally wanted from an Alien sequel with Fede Alvarez at the helm of it. I think most people out there will be very happy with this one. Certainly some people are going to be torn on some decisions made, but overall, I think it's easily the best thing that we've gotten from this franchise since the original two films. And like I said at the beginning, it's a good day to be an Alien fan. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put a 31 on 31 Monsters and Machines video up here where we ranked a bunch of different sci-fi, action, and horror franchises. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you stick around and check out all the numerous rankings I'm going to have come out over the next week. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.